Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another piano lesson with Warren. My name is Warren McPherson. And in today's tutorial, I want to address some things about scale practicing. I've been getting a lot of questions about practicing scales and fingerings. A few years ago, I did a tutorial on all the 12 fingerings of the major scale. And that's my most popular YouTube video. And I've gotten a lot of questions about that video and about the fingerings and how to practice scale. And so I decided to do another tutorial covering how to practice the major scales, because there's a method to it that makes it a little easier and a little more efficient. Because scale practicing can be daunting. There's a lot of scales out there: major scales, minor scale, pentatonics, blues scale, whole tone, chromatic, a lot of scales. And especially for a beginning piano player, it's daunting that you have to learn all those scales. But in this video, I'm going to show you 5 tips to apply to any scales you're practicing, and it should make things a little easier. Okay, let's take a look at it. The first tip I want to talk about is make your major scale practicing or your scale practicing a daily exercise. Just as how you get up in the morning, if you're into exercising, you do a little exercise, you go to the gym, make it a part of your routine. I like to practice in the mornings because I'm awake, I'm fresh, my brain's rested, my body is rested. I can focus easier, and so that's when I like to do my practicing. The other thing about daily scale practice is you don't want to practice every scale every day, or to practice all 12 major scale or all 12 minor scale in one sitting. At least not when you're starting out, when you're just learning a scale, because that can be tedious and it drains you. And you also want to leave time to practice other things like repertoire or chords, or stuff like that. So I usually say, as a beginner, take 10 to 15 minutes, no more than 15 minutes a day, and assign that to scale practice. And how you want to practice it now, for example, if you're doing major scales, we have 12 major scales because there's 12 tones in music. Divide that into 3 major scales per day. So for example, if you want to do the cycle of fourth, you can start with C, F, and B flat. Or if you want to do it chromatically, you can start with C, C sharp, and D, or C, D flat, and D. But the way I practice major scale, and the way I would recommend you practicing, is by grouping the scales into keys that has similar pattern in the fingering. And so you learn them faster that way. And again, if you go back to my video on how to play the fingering for the major scales, you'll see me talk about the groupings. And I'll get to that in a bit. So the first thing is pick 3 major scales and just work on those 3 for that particular practice that you're doing that day, whether it's morning, evening, or night. C major, for example, the fingering for the C major scale can also apply to D major, E major, G major, A major, and right hand B major, because the left hand B major is different. So you find out that C, D, E, G, and A carries the same fingering, both right hand and left hand. So you can group your scale practicing for that day. Say you're going to work on 3, work on C major, D major, and E major, because the fingerings will be the same. And so you're reaffirming each time you go through each of those keys what the fingering is for that particular scale. So that's how I would recommend practicing a scale. The next day you can say, now I'm going to practice G and A, again because they carry the same fingering. And because B right hand carries the same fingering, you could throw that in there too. And the fingering for the left-hand B scale start with finger 4, so it's a little different. If you also notice I might be going a little fast with the fingerings in this video, that's because I've covered all 12 fingerings in my video I did a few years ago on how to play all 12 major scales with the correct fingering. So if you're new and you want to get those fingerings, I would refer you to check out that video. I break it down, all the fingerings, nice and slow. In this video, I just want to show you how to practice your scale so you get the most out of it. So say Monday you practice C, D, and E. Tuesday you could practice G, A, and B. Wednesday you pick another 3 in terms of similarities. You can go to probably C sharp. C sharp or D flat, A flat. And the E flat carries the same fingering, so you could probably group those 3 for, say, Wednesday if you're practicing. And the same thing for the left hand. And you go through like that. So 3, 4 is 12. In 4 days, you would have covered all 12 major scales, only taking 10 to 15 minutes a day. So that's the first step in how to improve your scale or get the most out of your scale. Step number 2 is to group your scale according to fingerings. Scales that has similar fingerings, you want to group those and practice 3 per day. In 4 days, you would have gone through all 12 major scale. Step number 3 now is to start with hands separately, only 1 octave. So again, C, I know it feels boring, but trust me, this is the way you learn your scales correctly. Later on, you'll be able to play it effortlessly like that. But first, start with it just nice and slow. Do the same thing for the left hand. And if you go through each hand, say 2 or 3 times, that should take you no more than, I don't know, 2 minutes probably. And then you move on to the second scale. Say you're doing D. And if you notice, I'm going not only slowly, but evenly. So if you were to put a click, and for everybody, the click's going to be different. The pace at which you're going is going to be different. For me, that is slow. If you're a very beginner, probably you're going to find that a little too quick. Slow it down. The goal of slow practice is so you slow it down to a pace where you can feel comfortable playing it and feel relaxed. All right? So again, to recap, step number 1, 3 scales per day. Step number 2, group scales by fingerings. Step number 3, start with 1 octave. Step number 4, slow practice. The last step I'm going to talk about is to put pauses in the crossover. And this is for when you get a little more comfortable with the 1 octave and you decide to start to do 2 octave practicing, for example. When you're doing 2 or more octaves, so it's the same sequence. When you get to finger 4, you cross over to 1, and the sequence continues, and then reverse ascending. But at first, it can be a little bit tricky, especially when you get to 2 hands. So for those doing two hands, if you're doing 2 octave practicing now, the one tip that I recommend that helps with that, the confusion of which finger crosses when, is to put a pause on when the crossover happens. Pause, 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 descending, pause, pause, pause. And when that does, it starts to break up, so your muscle memory can see, okay, this is what, that's when the thumb goes under, or that's when finger 3 comes over. And you do the same thing for the left hand. Because if you don't put the pauses and you're trying to make it flow, you're going to realize you're ending up finishing your scale and realize you finished on finger 4 and 4 when you're supposed to finish on 5, that's because you crossed over with the wrong finger. And so a good way to practice 2 or more octaves is to put a pause on where the crossover happens. And you do that the same way, grouping the scales, only practicing 3 a day. That's when you get to 2 or more octaves. But if you're just beginning, you first want to start with just one hand, 1 octave. And if you find out that on one hand, 1 octave, you're not able to play it that smoothly, you can put the pauses in also. And the reason why the pauses works is because it helps to get rid of anxiety. You know, when you're playing the piano, you don't want to have any anxiety. You want to be as relaxed as when you're just sitting down watching a TV program. And so you have to practice how to be anxiety-free. And there's a way to do that by practicing without anxiety. If you're practicing your scales and you're missing fingers left and right and you're getting frustrated, your body's building up anxiety. And if you practice like that over a series of weeks, months, and years, you're going to realize that you're unable to play the piano relaxed and you can't flow. All of that I was just doing a while ago was almost effortless for me. Yeah, I've been playing for a while, but I've also practiced how to be anxiety-free. And that's how you get the most out of your scale practicing. So whether you're practicing minor scale, blues scale, major scale, pentatonics, apply these 5 steps. And I guarantee you, in a few weeks, few months, you'll see drastic changes, not only in your scale practice, but in your playing overall, because you're learning how to practice relaxed, in control, with minimal mistakes. And then you'll be able to eventually play faster, still with minimal mistakes, and still being relaxed. So again, to recap the 5-step, number 1, 3 scales a day. Try to keep it to that, 10 to 15 minutes, so you're not overwhelmed, you're not frustrated. Because scale practice is a daily thing. It's something you're going to continue to practice for months and years. So might as well just break it up in small bits and continue from there. Step number 2 is to group scales by fingering. Group the scales that have similar fingering. If you don't know what scales those are, check out my video, how to play all 12 major scales with the correct fingering, and you'll see how I break that down. Step number 3, start with one hand, 1 octave. If you're new to scale, start there until you feel comfortable enough to put in the other hand. Step number 4, practice slowly. And this doesn't only apply to scales. In anything you're doing, if you're trying to practice, say, 2-5-1s in different key, Stuff like that. I was just doing 2-5-1 in various keys with extensions and sevenths and so on. If you're doing exercises like that, first start slowly, because you don't want to practice anxiety. You practice slowly and eventually you'll be able to play faster. And the final step is to put pauses when you're crossing over doing multiple octave. So those are the 5 steps I have for you. Try those out and let me know what you think. Comment below and tell me what scale you're currently working on and what are the problems you're experiencing in working on those scales. All right, my name is Warren McPherson, and you can always find me at pianolessonwithwarren.com, on Facebook, Piano Lesson with Warren. Head over there, check out my website. I got some interesting things over there. I got free videos you can download. I got videos you can purchase. My latest video is on everything blues, and in that video I go through all 12 major scale, all 12 blues scales with the correct fingering. So if you're trying to get into the blues, that would be a perfect video for you, because after learning your major scale and your minor scale, the next scale is the blues scale. That's the one you want to be able to get that blues sound. And so in that video is over an hour long. I covered 12-bar blues, blues walking bass, blues licks, blues scales, and all sort of stuff. You can head over to my website and check that out. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. Give me a thumbs up. And again, comment below, let me know what are your difficulties in practicing scales. What are some of your roadblocks? I'd love to hear from you. Until then, keep listening, keep singing, and keep practicing, because that's how you'll continue to grow as a musician. Have a wonderful day. See you soon.